Okay, hello everyone. I am Erica Austin with Dogwise, and I am joined today by Niki French of Pup Talk. And we are
Hello.
here to talk about her book, Stop Walking Your Dog. So, if you have read this book, we welcome you to ask questions and send them in the comments for us. If you haven't read the book and you are interested in learning more about the book, please ask questions. We have the author here today to answer those questions for us. If you can hear us and see us and you're joining tuned in, please leave a comment so that we know that everything's working well. Like I said, we are excited to hear your questions and talk to Niki today. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. So, Niki, first question for you. What made you decide that you wanted to write a book specifically about this topic?
Yeah, I love writing. I absolutely love writing. So I knew as soon as I became a dog trainer that I wanted to write at least one book on dog training. But there's an awful lot of dog training books out there, as you know better than anyone.
That's true.
And I'd seen a series of clients that had dogs that were really struggling in the outside world. And to the point that I had said to a number of people, actually, what you need to do is you need to stop walking your dog. I actually said those words. And after saying it, I think for about the third time, I was like, oh, oh, that's a book. That's absolutely a book. You know, the framework is not my invention. Ditching the walks is not my invention. And a lot of good trainers will be well aware of that as a concept. But it was something that it became so apparent how much pressure people were under to keep taking their dogs for a walk, no matter what. And, you know, that social pressure and the relief that they had when I said to somebody, no, you need to stop walking your dog or walk them less. So the kind of the book almost wrote itself. Certainly the title literally came up and hit me in the face. And instantly I knew I had to write it. And I think I started writing about 3 weeks after I had that realization of that was the title. And yeah, then I just went through the steps of planning it and writing it, and sort of 6 months later it was out on the shelves. So yeah, it was.
I can tell you, as someone who is working with, like I said, you said there's a lot of dog training books out there, and someone who works for a publisher, 6 months is a really fast turnaround time. So, and I was admiring the cover on this book. It's so beautiful. I love the title. It really grabs people's attention. Do you have people who read the title or hear those words from you and think, what? I can't stop walking my dog? Are you crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, I am not the person that is saying no one should walk their dog ever. So I do have to clarify that. Whenever anything goes out in the press, it can be misconstrued. So yeah, it is definitely something that I need to get across. But I think as soon as you start talking about why it makes sense to have other things that you can do other than walking your dog, whether it's, you know, crate rest, some kind of restricted exercise, puppies that don't yet have skills, older dogs that might be having some arthritic conditions, or human issues. Hey, we all went into lockdown. In the UK, we were only allowed to walk our dog for 1 hour a day. So having a whole toolkit of things to do other than walk your dog. So as soon as people go, right, okay, I get it. I get it. But I don't get too much. Most of the people that are interested enough by the title, I think, have had some experiences where they go, oh, thank goodness. The relief, I think, is massive.
And that's what a gift to be able to give to people, that relief and that sense of, like you said, you know, the social pressure. Can you talk to that a little bit? The social pressure that we should walk our dogs, or that we're bad dog guardians if we don't walk our dogs twice a day around the block, is maybe the expectation in a lot of cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that a lot with, you know, I think it is just so drummed into everybody that if you have a dog, you should be walking them 2 to 3 times a day. That's just what you do. And a walk is a human invention. Dogs don't, you know, dogs off lead naturally in the wild or whatever. They don't walk at our pace. They don't walk in a straight line. You know, they are different paces. They're swirling, they're zigzagging, they're doing whatever. It's our invention. And of course we want to get them exercised, and we want to, you know, enrich their world in lots of different ways. But the responses I had to people from people of that relief of And I think it can often come from friends and family, and even within, you know, married couples or partners, a real disparity of, if you've got a dog that is struggling, it's that old, you know, that old thinking of, well, you need to wear them out. You need to do more, take them out, get them more exercise, throw the ball for them more. So giving people something, because, you know, if it's in a book, people generally think, well, it must be true, or the best that we know right now. So where people could go, look, there's even a book about it, you know, it gave them something to start conversations where they were feeling, you know, criticized or judged in some way for not looking after their dog, where if, in fact, often I think people's gut is pretty good at saying to them, something about this is not right. You know, they might not have known why, but they knew that just slogging it out on a walk was not right for them. It was causing their dog stress, or it was causing them stress. I recently did some research where it was amongst people that had stopped walking their dog as much over the last year or so, and I was asking them about the impacts, and it was nearly 70% of people that had reduced their walks had noticed positive changes in their dog. So saying that their dog was noticeably more relaxed in day-to-day life, or when they did go for a walk, if they'd reduced the number of walks, their dog was less stressed on the walks that they did go on, because they weren't in that constant state of expectation of something going to happen. And generally people were noticing really sort of positive behavioral changes in their dog. But it's just, I think people needed something to say, it's not just me. It's not about me being lazy or scared of walking my dog. You know, there was something behind it.
That's wonderful. I think that also when I first became a dog trainer, that adage of a tired dog is a good dog, that was out there a lot. And I remember learning about positive reinforcement and learning about training and shaping behavior, which really requires a lot of brain power from the dog, and learning that there is more than one way to tire your dog, and repetitive games of fetch with a chuck it, or just throwing the ball, or even, you know, throwing a Frisbee, that might wear out their body. But someone once made it the analogy of like when you've been traveling in an airport all day and you like got up at 6 and you've been traveling and you're at the airport, like you're tired at the end of the day, but it doesn't feel good. It's not like a good kind of exhaustion. Whereas if you like go on a hike with maybe your dog, or maybe not, maybe just you, and you're out and you're moving and you're taking your time and breathing in the world, and how that's like, it feels better to be that kind of tired instead of kind of the stressed tired. So I'm glad that you addressed that kind of myth of if you just wear them out, they'll be better behaved. And that's not the solution. That we are realizing that obviously dogs are much more well-rounded and have a lot more needs that we need to meet than just the physical need as the one-stop shop for their behavior problems.
Yeah. You know, my own dog, he's a collie lurcher cross. He's got a very collie brain, and he's just fast. He's got some real straight line speed on him as well. And he was a rescue, and he came to us at 8 months old. He'd been in and out of a very famous UK rescue centre twice by the age of 8 months old, just for being a very bouncy, very bright, very energetic young dog. And what we noticed very early on, that one walk a day was more than enough. And yeah, you know, it was a border collie crossed with a lurcher, and he was noticeably much harder work in the afternoon and in the evening if he'd had a second walk. And as soon as we skipped that and just kind of went, okay, we're just having one walk, might be first thing in the morning, might be lunchtime, might be later on in the day, we really try to mix that up. But he was noticeably better. So switching out at least one other walk for some brain activities, some physical activities, some sniffing activities, you know, a whole range of other little short bursts of activities at home, he's way calmer, way calmer. So yeah, it's noticeable.
And yeah, I have a border collie at home, and that's again well, you better give him an opportunity to run, and you take him on a bunch of walks. And there are lots of days we don't go for walks. We might do an extra training session or do something that he finds to be more reinforcing or more rewarding than sniffing around. And we go for sniffy walks and we enjoy our hikes, but we don't go every day because that's not the thing that's most important for him. We have a great comment from Lynn that I'm going to share. Lynn says, this is such an important concept in a shelter where stress is maximized by constant fence fighting as dogs exit the kennels. They come back from walking so much more stressed. Lynn, I have seen that, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And it is hard. You know, that's something in a shelter environment that's really difficult when you have dogs kennel to kennel and you have to walk them and you need to take them out for a walk, but past the other dogs. So what a wonderful perspective. Thank you for sharing that, Lynn. Do you have specific advice maybe for shelters or ways that they could apply this book, shelter workers or volunteers?
Yeah, yes. You know, it's not something I've particularly addressed in the book, but it's an interesting one because obviously that environment, it's so much harder than it is in a home environment to be able to take them into whichever room in your house, or maybe you've got a garden or a yard or something like that and do activities with them. But certainly depending on what time is available to the staff that are there, the volunteers, the staff, whatever, anything that people can do to help them with enrichment, lots of sniffing. You know, I'm a massive fan of using recycling and my dog's daily food allowance. So, you know, it's zero cost. You know, you're not talking about buying equipment. You're just going to be using food that is bought anyway. Anything that is making them work. And even when they are coming out for a walk, for me, just like simple scatter feeding into grass or into a yard or something like that. So getting them to do things that are very scent based in that kind of environment I think would be very helpful. Because, you know, and also just, you know, the barking in those kind of environments is obviously very stressful. So difficult situation, but I know, good people that are working there will definitely be building on that kind of canine enrichment angle of things.
Well, and it is interesting you bring up recycling. I think the thing that we run into a lot in shelters is limited resources. We either have limited time, limited budget, limited staff, limited volunteers. When COVID hit, I know that I was working full-time at a shelter during COVID, and it was really hard because we were trying to social distance, but still take care of the animals. I think that something I've really been impressed by is when you speak with your staff or with your volunteers and say, do you have any ideas? And offering some education of, you know, this is what enrichment looks like. And this is why sniffing is so important for a dog's brain. We had a section of our shelter that we housed small animals for rescue. So we had rabbits and guinea pigs. And one day we were talking as a group and decided that we were cleaning out these shavings and the rabbit hair and fur every day and throwing them in the trash. And I said, what if we got a cardboard box and we just hid it somewhere on our walks where everyone's walking the dogs in the same pattern? And all of a sudden these dogs are running over and sticking their head in a box and just sniffing. And we were going to throw that away anyway, but it's just, there's rabbit poop in there. That's so exciting to smell. You know, they came out with like rabbit fur stuck to their nose and you could just see they were so excited of like, wow, that's cool and something different, and getting to have that mental exercise. I love that. A little bit unique. And that was free. That was something that was going in the trash anyway. So like you said, with recycling.
Just like that little bit of imagination. And that kind of game for me is a brilliant transition game. So, you know, where I've had clients that have literally stopped walking their dog, you know, there's a case, a very small case study in the book where it's a young collie, a border collie, that they stopped walking their dog for sort of 2.5, 3 months completely. You've then got to work out what's the best way to transition them back into doing some activities in the outside world. And something like that, using a box, you know, whether it's a cardboard box, you know, or whether a noise box, you know, a plastic box with things in it, where it becomes an activity that they're like, yes, it's the game where I get to stick my head in and sniff out the rabbit fur. That then can be something that you can take out and about with you. So, you know, you could do it, you know, out, you know, do it in your hallway. You could do it out the front of your house. If your dog is good traveling in the car, I would put that box preloaded in the car with the dog, go take the car out to somewhere that is probably the least busy place, like less likely to see dogs or people or whatever their struggle is. Get the box out, then get the dog out, and they're immediately on task. head in a box, sniffing, doing their thing, not coming out and instantly looking for something to react to. So those kind of activities can be brilliant to help transition dogs into, you know, coming back out into doing more normal things out and about. Yeah, it's a great one.
Suggestion. I wouldn't have thought to take it with you and put it in the car and preload it and have it ready.
Yeah,
and
really useful.
We've got Fred has mentioned in the comments that he has a smooth collie, and it's been 6 months of trying to build up to a walk, and she's very fearful. She doesn't know how to do anything but treat and retreat. So I love treat and retreat. I love using pattern games with dogs, but every once in a while you'll find that a dog is not finding the food reinforcing because the environment is overwhelming. And you talk about that in your book about a dog being over threshold, and while they might eat, maybe they're not enjoying it as much as we might think. So I love that suggestion of bringing maybe something to sniff, where you said they get out of the car and instead of scanning the environment, they say, oh, I recognize this game, which is go sit in a box and sniff the rabbit fur.
And I used to recommend people doing like front paws, 2 feet on, you know, taking some little block or something like that again. So it's a behavior that the dog knows. They learn to put their front paws up on things and they get a treat. But if you've got a dog that is reactive, perhaps they're very vigilant, you know, the herding breeds and the sight hounds, they're constantly scanning already. Actually, you don't particularly want them doing this. So putting their head into something that is, you know, that they know and love in a relaxed environment, it can be really useful.
That's wonderful. I'm going to share this comment from Kara. We had a program called Positive Start at the shelter I volunteered at, where we would teach them new tricks, lots of enrichment activities such as Find It, to try to get to work their minds a bit. They were crazy barking when we got them and tired when we left, and we did not walk them.
Wonderful.
So great example, like you're saying, of having a behavior like put your feet on a box or Find It is such a great activity. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it just goes to show, you know, that thinking of, oh no, I need to take them on a walk to tire them out. You don't. You just create an athlete if you're doing too much of it. You absolutely don't need to do it to have a tired and happy dog. I love that.
Absolutely. Lynn mentioned that she used your book this month when we had a 90-year-old man who adopted a young shepherd and could not safely walk him. So that's another great example. I know that you've mentioned a few examples. Sometimes it's dog-centric, of the dog's not ready to go out and walk 5 miles next to their person or even around the block. But can you speak also to maybe some limitations that you've run into with the human end of the leash, where it might not be the best situation for the human to be trying to walk their dog regularly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked with quite a few clients that have had dogs that have pulled their owners over, and it doesn't need to be a really heavy dog to pull you over if you're caught off balance. I'm sure most of us have experienced that in some way, shape or form. But I know of people that have, you know, suffered like wrist injuries, hand injuries, shoulder injuries. So there's obviously that side of things. But assuming, you know, your dog is just a perfectly normal dog in life, I had a stress fracture in my foot. Just as we went into lockdown, I was in plaster cast. So, you know, anybody that's had any kind of injury and involving plaster, then you'll know that unless you've got an army of people to help take your dog out, if you can adapt a whole series of games to play in your home. I was playing games seated in the garden, so I'd be crutches out to the garden, prop my chair up, and I'd be flinging my dog's kibble around the garden. And it's amazing what you can do while seated. Obviously, you know, with a certain pandemic, lots of restrictions on us. And I think the other thing that is striking me more and more, the more people that are emailing me having read the book, is about personal stress. And I think that there are times when it might not be anything to do with the dog and the behavior at all, but they are having such a hard time of it that they don't feel able to go out and walk their dog. And I think that's quite hard for some people to understand, because they might think, oh, well, surely that'll make you feel better. Get out, get some exercise, get some fresh air. But that's not always the case. And to layer on top of that, the pressure of thinking, the guilt, well, I can't take my dog out because, you know, I might be having a panic attack or whatever, you know, you're having an exceptionally bad time, or maybe you have an intermittent illness, knowing that there's things that you can do, and knowing that you're not being a bad dog, mum or dad or guardian, because you can do stuff that can keep them occupied and happy and physically active. So yeah, I think the human emotional side of things is becoming more and more apparent to me, how many people are affected. and removing that guilt is a big relief for people.
That's such a unique perspective, especially, like you were saying, as the author, where people are contacting you of, I've read the book and I feel this relief. So what a great reinforcement loop for you to hear, hey, this is working for your dogs.
Yeah.
Remind our audience, if you have questions, just go ahead and leave us a comment. We'll put it up on screen and ask Niki. Niki, as you were talking about that, and you're talking about this human end of the leash with I almost said the trainer, because that's where my thoughts were going. I know for me, when I take my dog for a walk, unless we are going at an off leash, allowed to be off leash hike area, I'm thinking about training. Is my dog pulling the leash? Are they, and even if I'm walking around the neighborhood, I'm a dog trainer. So, and the neighbors know. So if my dog is barking and lunging at a squirrel, they know the dog trainer is letting their dog bark and lunge at, like, how dare you? Your dog should be in a perfect heel. And I'm like, no, it's enriching for him to chase squirrels. Don't find us, but that, I feel like when you're saying, well, take your dog for a walk, because people are saying, take your dog for a walk, it's going to help reduce stress. Not for me. When I'm taking my dog for a walk, unless I'm purposely doing a decompression walk on a back clip harness and a long line in the woods, or off leash where we're allowed to be, I am constantly thinking about, what is everybody thinking when I'm walking my dog? Is my dog having a good time? Are they sniffing enough? Why are they sniffing so long? I would like to keep going, and it can be a really stressful thing to feel that, like you said, that social pressure, and maybe infer a little judgment from people, but also just for me as a trainer thinking, okay, what are we training? What are we working on? And sometimes it's hard to relax into the walk and be present and mindful and enjoy it. And so the idea of going for a walk can feel a bit aversive at times of, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for the first 2.5, nearly 3 years with Bodhi, he was hard work. I was definitely the dog and I often wear my dog training jacket just because it's the most waterproof one I've got. So on the back, it says, do you need dog training help? And there I am with this dog that's pogoing or trying to roll in fox poo or whatever. So I don't mind putting myself out there and making myself vulnerable to say, look, I'm the dog trainer that doesn't have a perfect dog. There is, who wants a perfect dog? But I'm the one that has the dog that with struggles. But I don't mind that. I'm happy to wear that. But I often, it had me in tears. It had me in tears because I was thinking, I'm a dog trainer, and he's not making fast progress. He wasn't an easy dog, but I definitely was thinking, gosh, maybe I don't have the skills to help him. But I just had to be patient. And actually, now he's a wonderful dog. Now, he still has his quirks. He's not completely off lead in every space going, but I really used to feel that pressure. There were times when I really didn't look forward to taking him out. Really didn't.
Yeah, I have a vivid memory of I was walking my dog through town one day and we were headed to the farmer's market where there's lots of dogs and, it's crazy there. Very exciting environment. And we were walking up to the farmer's market and he was voluntarily in a perfect heel. And I heard people be like, wow, look at that dog. Wow. And I'm all like, oh yeah, we're doing great. And then, we go to the farmer's market and maybe a little trigger stacking. I don't know. And then we're coming back and he is like, why? And he's like, get some of this energy out. And people are like, whoa, look at that dog. And I'm like, it's the same dog. We're just later. And we are done being good and well-behaved and what society thinks is a perfect dog walking in a perfect heel. I'm so much happier when we're on an off-leash hike and he's able to run and sniff and chase up trees. And he is too, but society's perception of what's appropriate. And of course we should do what is safe for our dogs and for other people. But that idea of, if your dog is in a perfect heel next to you, they're good. And if they're not, they're bad. And how that plays into being on a walk and being around other people who are on a walk. And I'm so glad that in your book, you don't just talk about reactive dogs, because I mostly work with reactive dogs. And reactive dogs, that's a fun puzzle for me. But the fact that you're also mentioning, young puppies are not appropriate to go out on walks into all sorts of places, and maybe older dogs or dogs who have an injury or things like that. When you, maybe not with puppies specifically, but maybe older dogs or a dog that has an injury that you weren't expecting, do you recommend to people who read your book or who are thinking about trying to incorporate some kind of enrichment, do you recommend that you start using these games before you need them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked with people that have had, you know, say the dog's broken its leg and they're on crate rest and it's just like, help, you know, and so we've worked out how you can make enrichment work when the dog's got a massive cone on its head, which actually there's an awful lot of enrichment you can't do with a dog that's got a massive cone on its head. So yeah, absolutely. I think any kind of activities, any kind of brain games, any kind of scenting work from a preventative point of view for any kind of doggy dementia, like canine, decline, cognitive decline. For dogs, maybe as they get older, where their sight might begin to fail, their hearing might begin to fail. Generally, their sense of smell is going to be the last to go. So the more you can do with them early on, hopefully, the more preventative measures, use it or lose it kind of mentality. So I think there's that side of things. But also, if your dog knows a whole series of, I say tricks, but I mean, they're just fun activities. I think tricks trivializes it a little bit, but, you know, just good brain games and physical activities to do. Yes, if they know them before you need them, amazing. But there's always going to be a situation that you didn't prep for. And yeah, we'll just deal with that. You know, you can always do something, but ideally, yes, absolutely. Because also you never know, you know, heat extremes. We've recently had some really cold weather in the UK. And sometimes we get, you know, weather that is far too hot, probably not the same extremes that you'll see over in the US. But there are times when the dogs really shouldn't go out, and they can happen, you know, at you know, relative short notice.
Yeah, Lynn had commented that in Arizona in the summertime, they have several hundred dogs to walk in her shelter in limited time because of extreme heat. And I know temperatures have been hot in the summer, and they get really hot in Arizona. And also, you know, rainy days. We have had, I'm in California right now, and it's been record amounts of rain. They're not used to that. They want their sunny San Diego days to be able to walk their dog whenever. And now it's raining all the time. And we're seeing a lot of people with dogs who are maybe struggling because they're not used to being cooped up inside for 3 or 4 days at a time, where this is atypical weather for them. So I do have a question from Fred for you. When you do nose work, how do you prevent the dog from just watching where you place the treat and go to it?
So I would use a game called Joyful Stays, which if your dog has got a good boundary, a good place, whether if they can either settle into a down position or on a boundary, if they can't, then either have someone else to hold them or have them in a crate with the door shut or behind a baby gate or behind a door. I actually don't mind. Well, I think there's a number of different ways you can play it. I will do a fake putting of food down. So I will go, oh, I might be putting a piece of food here behind this chair leg. Oh, I might be putting a piece of food here. And I will do that a number of times. Some of the positions will have food, some of them won't. So I think there's that, and then release them to it. If you don't want them to see, do it in another room. I would have them somewhere else where they can't see. If you're just hiding, you know, a scent tin or a piece of Kong or a toy or something like that, have them somewhere where they can't see you, and then go off and squirrel it. And then, you know, if for dogs that sort of know, or, you know, and get involved. For me, scenting is about you being a two-man team, you know, so you can go with them and you can encourage them. And, you know, that pleasure of finding the article is all going to be associated with you, which is a brilliant relationship building thing. That's massive.
That's great. Wonderful answer. I like that idea of pretending like you're putting food somewhere so the dog doesn't know, and they really do have to use their nose. I like that idea a lot. I'm going to use that one. Marianne has a question for you. Are you saying there are some dogs who will not learn to walk correctly on a leash, even with positive management, etc.? My dog often still pulls on the harness when she's excited or over threshold. Should I just not take her to the places where she gets really excited, even when I can let her off the leash once we arrive, for example, at the beach? Great question, Marianne.
Yeah, really good question. I love that. So sounds very similar to experiences I had with my own dog. So I think as much as possible, try not to let them rehearse what you don't want them to do. So if that means they can't, if they go to a place and they pull, I wouldn't take them there if you can possibly help it. So if it's a very practiced behavior, if a dog has been pulling on a lead and has been pulling on a lead for months or years, for them, a walk looks like pulling. It's a very familiar feeling. A lot of, you know, I'm not just talking huskies, a lot of dogs have obviously been bred to work for us, to pull. That opposition reflex, it feels good. Even if they're on a collar and they're almost choking themselves, it still feels good to be pushing and, you know, pulling, you know, pushing into the harness or pulling. So trying to limit that rehearsal, it can be useful to start training with a new piece of equipment. So if they're not on a harness, using a harness. If they're on a harness, is there a different kind of harness that will feel slightly different? If conditioned really kindly, I think head hop collars can be useful if it's used as a positive piece of equipment and it's not about yanking the nose or holding the head in any way. It can just be maybe just wearing a light coat or a fleece so that there's something different on the dog's body, and then only practicing the good behaviors. So going somewhere where they are going to have a successful walk. So it might just be the new piece of equipment on and parading around the garden or parading around the house, you know, doing some magic hand type games of sort of either feeding them as they're at your side, any game that's going to reinforce them walking nicely at your side with no tension through any kind of lead whatsoever. When I used to take Bodhi out, I would know as soon as we got there, he's going to want to go to the toilet within the first 60 seconds within the. So I would do a quick risk assessment. I'd either have the long line on him or I'd think there's no one around. I'm either going to trot with him because he's going to pull. He wants the toilet. So, you know, he kind of wants to get there in a hurry, but I don't want him to practice pulling on the lead at all. So I either trot with him so that lead is slack, or I drop the lead and just get him to where he wants, you know, so he can get to where he wants to go with no tension through the lead. And then I, you know, catch up with him and pick the lead up or whatever. So not letting them practice the pulling and lots of rehearsal of the good stuff, maybe with a new piece of equipment. That's kind of would be my sort of training plan for that kind of thing. And there is some great games that you can teach to sort of reprogram that, rather than a walk looks like pulling, a walk actually, pulling means come back and check in with you. So there are some really nice little games that you can teach a dog so that they just get used to not pulling, which, you know, it can take a bit of unpicking. But I think all dogs can learn to walk really nicely at your side. I haven't met one that we couldn't make improvements on where they were, definitely.
That's such a wonderful answer. And I'm thinking as I'm looking at this question too, you know, I love that response about not letting your dog rehearse what you don't want them to get good at. Because in this example, if the dog is pulling to somewhere where you can get off leash, then what a huge reinforcement for pulling to get there faster. And even as you're talking about Bodhi, if he's trying to use the toilet, that relief that he would feel is very reinforcing. And so if that comes right immediately after the behavior of pulling, and the consequence then becomes relief or the reward of being able to be off leash and run around, then we are strengthening that behavior by definition. If it's reinforcing the behavior, it follows. So I really love that example that you're giving of where can you practice this where they're not rehearsing pulling, and then just the simple suggestion of maybe changing the equipment a little bit so that the picture looks or maybe feels different to the dog. That's a wonderful, wonderful example. Thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
It looks like we're wrapping up with our questions. Niki, could you take a minute and just tell people if they have questions for you that they didn't get to ask today, or if they want to get in touch with you, where they could find you?
Yeah, my website's a good place to just sort of connect into anything, which is very simply puptalk.co.uk. On social media, on Instagram and Twitter, I'm puptalk101. And then on Facebook, I'm puptalk. So you'll find me pretty easily through there. So yeah, come and connect with me. I
also heard you have a podcast.
I do have, Pup Talk the podcast. So that comes out fortnightly, and it was actually started in lockdown, and it came about because I'm quite shy and I'm not very chatty, believe it or not. I've got better at it over the years, but I'm naturally quite reserved. But if I'm with a dog, I can stop and chat to anyone about dogs. So that was the premise for the podcast, of me talking to other dog lovers, dog professionals about anything to do with dogs. So we have a complete free remit to talk about dog sports, dog nutrition, dog training, dog grooming, anything. If it's got dog in the title somewhere, we can talk about it. So yeah, that was
That's wonderful. Well, everyone go check out Niki and Pup Talk, and be sure, if you have not bought your copy of Stop Walking Your Dog, you can get it at dogwise.com. It is available in this beautiful paperback version. You can also get an ebook, which you can read on any mobile device. So we invite you to go to dogwise.com and buy your copy of that book. Niki, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for everyone who tuned in. We'll see you guys next time.
My pleasure.